Hello and welcome to another episode of Judge of Character. As always, I'm your host, Steve. Well, last week, folks, we looked at the king of slasher movies, Jason Voorhees, that implacable masked madman who rips teenagers apart with nary a word. But he wasn't the only psycho killer running around in the 1980s. As I said in the previous episode, the 80s were the heyday for slasher movies and their villains. After the success of Friday the 13th, there seemed to be a new slasher movie every other week, each one introducing their own boogeyman to terrorize its victims. But in 1984, we were introduced to the boogeyman to end them all. Now, one of the components of slasher films I've mentioned is isolation. You take your would-be victims and you put them somewhere where no one can help them. So what's the most isolated place you can think of? How about your dreams? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're looking at the epitome of nightmares himself, Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger is the main villain of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, a horror series that delivers the scares in the most vulnerable of places, our dreams. The first film was released in 1984 and told the story of 4 teens who are being hunted in their dreams by a mysterious man with a horribly burned face and a metal claw on his right hand. This man is Freddy Krueger, a child killer who was murdered years prior by the parents of the teens after a slip-up in the justice system allowed him to walk away unpunished. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? With the kids now teens, Freddy has returned from the grave to take his revenge on those who killed him by killing their kids where they can't protect them. From there, he slaughters them all one by one, offing them all in their nightmares, which kills them in the real world. Eventually, Nancy is the only one left and has to fight Krueger on her own. The first movie was immensely popular, due in part to the unique way it doled out the horror. While there was still some blood and gore to go around, the real scares came from not knowing whether you were watching the real world or the dream world. Naturally, the popularity of the film made a sequel inevitable, and sure enough, just like with Friday the 13th and Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street was followed by a slew of sequels and spin-off material. But we'll get to that soon enough. It's obvious enough that Freddy Krueger has long since found a place in the annals of culture, both in and out of the horror genre. But why is that exactly? Well, that's what we're here to find out, so get comfy, grab a cup of coffee, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. It's time to learn more about Freddy Krueger, and as always, we're going to start with his personality. With Freddy, his personality as a character is a key element to his long life as a character and as an icon. Whereas most other slasher villains have either simple or almost non-existent personalities beyond killing, Freddy offers a more interesting take. To put it simply, Freddy is a jovial character, always laughing and cracking jokes as he brutally murders his victims. In the early films, this gave him an obvious creepiness, and made him frightening simply because of how much he enjoyed what he was doing. In later films, however, this joviality would turn to camp, and Freddy would go from being a truly frightening figure in horror to something more akin to a scary clown. Clown?
Aren't you going to say hello?
Ah! Get it away! Get it off screen! Oh, get it away! Anyway, despite the snarky sense of humor, Freddy has always been sadistic and brutal, taunting his victims right before slaughtering them, often appearing as loved ones or using something that gives the person strength to instead turn it back on them. Now, why is the personality of Freddy so important here? What makes his personality so different from other slasher villains? It's simple. As I said earlier, most slasher villains have a one-dimensional personality, but while Freddy is also simplistic in this regard, there's a sinister sense of purity to it. Freddy doesn't kill because he's driven by some subconscious need to do so. He kills because he thinks it's fun. But where did all this come from? How was Freddy born, psychologically speaking? To answer that, we're going to have to look at his past. We learn later in the series that Freddy's mother, Amanda Krueger, was a nun who worked in an insane asylum. One night, she's accidentally locked up over the weekend with 100 of the patients in a giant room, where she's brutally raped over and over. 9 months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy, the bastard son of 100 maniacs. From there, Freddy showed quite a few sociopathic tendencies as a child, eventually resulting in his becoming a child killer when he became an adult. Basically, one could say he was born evil. Between that and the sick sense of humor he displays, audiences were guaranteed to remember him, thus solidifying his place in horror history. With all that, it's easy to see how he has such a huge advantage over other horror movie villains. But what about the stuff that really makes Freddy a slasher villain? What about the kills?
Just like his slasher brethren, Freddy has racked up an impressive number of kills since his inception. Granted, it's nowhere near as high as others, but then who's counting? But while the other killers are content to just grab various sharp instruments and jab them through your body like you were a pincushion, Freddy goes for the gusto and murders you in your friggin' sleep. This is an especially terrifying thing to consider, as our dreams are usually a mental safe haven for us in the night. And when we do have nightmares, they aren't meant to hurt you. The idea that someone could basically enter your mind and completely corrupt your dreams before viciously murdering you is an extreme violation.
But, as horrible as the idea is, one can't argue with the fact that it has provided moviegoers with some memorable deaths over the years.
Freddy's modus operandi is to attack you in your dreams. In doing so, he's not just physically attacking you, he's mentally and emotionally attacking you. This goes back to the sadistic element of Freddy. He uses your own fears and worries to get at you right before slicing you up like a Thanksgiving turkey.
You stuffed her like a Thanksgiving turkey!
What even the hell? Seriously, who's editing this?
I think it's time for a break, folks.
Stay tuned. Judge of Character will be right back. Welcome back to Judge of Character.
Okay. Well, now that we've learned a little bit more about his personality and his preferred method of killing, it's time to learn more about the actors who've donned the glove.
Over the years and sequels, Freddy has been portrayed primarily by this man, Robert Englund. Obviously, since he has played the character over the years, Englund's portrayal is the most well-known, and he has helped develop the character as much as any writer or director has. Englund's acting as Freddy is spot on, consistently making the character frightening even at his most campy moments. Which is amazing, because when you see him out of makeup, he's like a total nerd! And I mean that in a good way. So to think that a guy like this could play a killer like this is a testament to his skills as an actor. And while there have been others to don the glove, Englund will always be Freddy to us.
But what of the others? Well, there's really only one other person who's donned the glove. So let's talk about him!
Jackie Earle Haley, who most of you may know as Rorschach from Watchmen, played our favorite kid killer in the 2010 remake of the original film.
While his portrayal was met with some resistance from some of the more hardcore fans, most people were more than happy with Haley's take on the role. Hell, even Englund himself said he was the perfect man to take over.
And how? Haley's take on the character, keeping in line with the remake's gritty feel, is just as frightening as Englund's. This was a welcome change of pace, bringing Freddy back to his roots as an evil murderer.
In fact, let's divert for a moment and take a little time to talk about some of the more select films in the franchise, starting not with the remake, but with something just as good. Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Of all the films in the Nightmare franchise, this movie, besides the original and its remake, is easily the scariest of them all. Much of this has to do with it taking place in the quote-unquote real world, and therefore we are seeing not fictional characters, but real people having to deal with the horror of Freddy Krueger. This version of Freddy, which is actually an evil entity trying to enter our world as Freddy, was a serious upgrade, with a much more menacing look, including a claw that looked like it was literally a part of him. This version of the character was a welcome breath of fresh air after several movies where Freddy cracked bad joke after bad joke.
John, get out of here now, please! Now.
Hey! You forgot the power glove!
What do you know? I beat my high score.
Really? Really?
Yes, this film was a fantastic return to the types of scares that Freddy used to give us, but what of the remake? I said before that Jackie Earle Haley's performance took us back to the roots of the character, back before the wisecracking. And it's true. While many aren't fans of the remake, I myself find it enjoyable, injecting a new life into the series.
I especially liked how they made him even more sinister than he was. You see, in the original films, Krueger was just a child killer. But in the remake, they actually went out and said he was a child molester. He molested little kids. And that fact by itself made him even more of a monster than he was before. Now, to me, England will always be Freddy Krueger. But Haley turned in a fantastic performance, one that I think fans are going to appreciate for years later. Well, what else is there to discuss about the Springwood slasher? Oh yes, how about his themes?
Freddy can be interpreted in any number of ways, from being an allegory of pressures faced by teens, to being a subtle reference to closeted homosexuality. And while there are many of these, they are all connected by one thing: the subconscious. To that end, Freddy can best be seen as a summation of all those things that frighten us. Some are obvious, such as real phobias, while others are more subtle, such as social fears. But either way, Freddy Krueger has something for everyone in his nightmarish kingdom.
So with everything I've discussed tonight, let's recap, shall we?
Whether it's the jovial, murdering personality, the brutal and interesting way of killing, how he was played by his actors, or the various themes he represents, it's easy to see how Freddy Krueger became as popular and iconic as he is. With fans all around the world of all ages, I don't think we've seen the last of Freddy.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we bring Halloween here at Judge of Character to a close. It was fun, though, wasn't it? And don't worry, I've already started making plans for next year. So have no fear. Or better yet, have plenty of it. In any case, I shall see you all again in November with some more lighter fare. In any case, as always, I'm your host, Steve, reminding all of you to stay in character.
Ha 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 ha!